sometimes I go extra hard at people, Delia, like, because in a subconscious way, I'm kind of trying to make up for not standing up for Michael. Do you know what I mean?
Do you want to introduce yourself or what do you want to do?
Yeah, sure, absolutely. What do you want me to start by saying? Just to
Whatever, whatever you want.
awesome. So my name's Varad Mukhedkar. I'm currently 20 years old. Studying at the University of Western Australia. I live in Perth. And right now I'm studying economics. I started off with accounting and finance, with a direct pathway to law, but I realized that economics was my main kind of love. So that's currently what I'm studying. And yeah, at the moment I'm part of a couple of different projects going on. But I've looked at some of the guest lists you've had on your podcast in the past, and looking at some of the names there, there's not too much special about me, to be honest. I'm just like a regular uni student, so a bit out of my breath here. But thank you so much for inviting me on.
What do you mean? Who are the names you're talking about?
Talking about some of the big names. I mean, some of the boys I know as well. But even just people like your dad, like Costello, like like past Garrett, Jack, all these people in different ways have achieved so much, and I guess yeah, I mean compared to what some of those names have done, I probably, to be fair, haven't done as much. But there's the hope that maybe one day I will.
Well, you've achieved something that none of those people have, which
What's that?
is make hilarious TikToks.
Oh, thank you. Thank you. I appreciate it. Some people actually do tell me, they're like, "Oh, it's amazing. Your TikToks are so good. You should keep making more content." And some people just like, "Oh, it's downright cringe." And you can tell which people like enjoy the content and which people just think it's cringe. But yeah, it's very nice of you to say. I enjoy it. I enjoy making the
Who says
TikToks.
who says it's cringe?
Oh, like, I don't know. I guess just people around in the community. I mean, it's a nice look because I make TikToks basically, which are kind of like a bit of this satires, basically, kind of looking at like, I don't know, maybe sounds a little bit racist, but looking at like brown people's culture and comparing it to kind of Western world culture. Um, and yeah, I like to think it's funny, and I have had a couple of videos that have done really well, and it's people from a lot around the rest of Australia and India, because that's the way it works with TikTok. I mean, you can make it big with mini videos like that, but then of course there are so many people who are within my own community here in Perth. So like there are a lot of people who see it who'll be like, "Oh, I know that guy," and yeah, I don't know. So some people just
Really? On the
yeah.
street?
Or when I say like at the end of the day, Perth, you have to remember that Perth is pretty small, right, compared to like a lot of places around the world. Compared to, you grew up in Melbourne, right? Um, in Melbourne, it's like who really knows anyone? At least that's our perception from Western Australia. But in Perth, it's like you really do know a lot of people, and especially within like the Indian community, it's like everyone knows everyone. And then even at university, it's like, there are three big universities here, so it's kind of like most people go to one of those three. So yeah, people definitely recognize you, and yeah, but it's also been a learning curve for me. Like in terms of, I guess I always cared, and I guess still do care so much about what people kind of think about me, what people's perceptions are, people who I didn't even know. But I think even just doing something like this, it's such a small thing. It's a hobby. It's not like I'm trying to make a career out of TikTok. But yeah, it's taught me that like people are always gonna there's always gonna be someone who has something mean or rude to say about you. You know what I mean? It's like, and I guess what helps me go to bed at night is that thing, that knowing that there's one person in this world when I go to bed who thinks that I'm the greatest thing to happen to the Southern Hemisphere, and there's also one person in this world who thinks that like I'm the world's biggest idiot. So it's taught me a lot about that, and you just gotta, I guess, learn to tune out some of the more negative things. Because even some of the comments that have been made haven't been some of the nicest. But my older brother, Varun, was basically saying to me, he's like, that's when you know that you're doing well. When you start to get some of the more hateful comments, that's kind of when you know that your content is doing well. You've made it to that level. You're not just in your mini community.
What are the negative comments? Well, first of
Um,
all, who's the one person who thinks you're the greatest thing that ever happened to the Southern Hemisphere?
to be honest, probably my older brother, probably Varun. I mean, look, there at the end of the day, there's always your tightest friends, but which I'm lucky to say that I do have a lot of people who love me a lot, but I guess that's what I mean. Like, there's a big group of people who genuinely do, and I think this is the same for many people. But then, of course, there are many people, some who you might know well, some who you might not know so well, who aren't the biggest fans of you, and I think that's just the way it is. I mean, I'm sure you've experienced things like this throughout your journey, right? The kind of places you've been in, the high pressure environments you've been in. Obviously, you and I went on that trip together early in the year to India, and hearing about all that, I'm sure that like some of this resonates with you, right?
Well, so what are some of the mean comments you've got?
Um, like I guess people just taking shots at my content, but I guess look, there've been some like not so nice things, like in some of the language that has been used probably hasn't been the most like appropriate for the podcast. You know, nothing
I
so
mean,
bad, but
people have said all kinds of words on this podcast, so you can
yeah,
say whatever you want.
well, it's
But
it's
what? So it's just random attacks, like "fuck you" or something.
yeah,
You
it's like
suck.
fuck you, like you. I got called a melt. Now I didn't know what a melt was. So someone said like, yeah, they're like fuck you, you little melt, like MELT, comma, and then it was like so much stuff after that. It was like dot dot dot, you this, you that, your contents, you know. And I saw that comment. I kind of laughed actually because I just found it funny. I didn't even know that melt was like was a derogatory word.
What does that mean?
I actually don't know. I searched up an Urban Dictionary that night. We were actually in Adelaide watching. Well, I was with a couple of mates watching the England-India semi-final for the World Cup. So we'd gone over after uni finished, and we were reading through the comments that night, and we're trying to Google it, but we couldn't really get our head around it. And then you get a couple of comments in Hindi, which you see a couple of the words, and you're like, oh yeah, clearly those are some swear words which I know of. See, it's things like that. But then, to be fair, there are some comments which I'm like, fair enough. Like some people will genuinely be like, this is just, some people are like, this is just disrespectful, or like, shame on you for talking about your culture that way, or and someone
But
made a comment like, oh, you laugh now, but you'd be crying like a little, like a little bitch if it was a white person making a joke on brown people. And I kind of read those comments and I'm like, you know what, to be honest, like there's actually a bit of truth in that. Like I know that my content is like, I know it's a little bit edgy. Like it does push the envelope a bit. Um and yeah,
so
I think when people say yeah.
I was just going to give an example of what your content is. So, because I was just watching them
Mm.
while we are waiting to record, and I don't know, I think it's so good. I love it how you start. You see how you start, and it's like you're just getting used to it. So they're not because I keep talking about this, but eventually I am going to probably start TikTok, and it's like, okay, they're rubbish at
Mm.
the start. You're getting used to it, but it's the ideas there, right? It's always like white person version and then brown person version. And so
Yeah.
it's like the classic one of like getting a grade, and like the Indian dad being like, you only got 99%. And like there's another guy who I follow who does it with which is like Asian dad, and he's like a Chinese guy, and it's like the dad. And
Mm.
it's so funny, like, in my opinion. And
Yeah.
I find your stuff really funny. Like the Indian, it's like how a white person entering a party. I love that one when you
Yeah.
walk in and it's like, g'day, and just like tapping people on the shoulder. And then it's like Indian person coming into a party, and it's like you're touching all the girls' feet and
Yeah,
whatever.
like where people are gonna get the wrong idea from that comment of touching all the girls' feet, but no, like out of respect, it's like a respectful gesture to do in India where you but yeah, absolutely, absolutely.
But and then
I like it.
it's like you can see from the first one, it's like the ideas there, but you're just learning how to do it. So it's like it has 1,000 views or whatever for the first view, and then suddenly it's
Yeah,
like 100,000 views, and then one of them has, what's the one that has 1 million views? It's
yeah,
it's the grades.
yeah.
It's
It's the
like, Dad,
grades
I
one.
got But
Yeah,
it's like
I
my dad. So my dad's not. My dad's like super high standard. So if I'm
mm,
like, yeah, I got 99%, he'd be like, where's the other 1%? But it's not like I'm sitting there like I'm so offended. Like I'm a white person and you have like misrepresented me. Like it's like clearly it's comedy.
wait, sorry, you broke up there, Delia.
So clearly
Uh,
what you're doing is comedy. So it's not like
yeah,
people don't need to get so offended, right?
yeah, no, absolutely, yeah. I think it's interesting when you said like, yeah, in reflection, like starting off, I didn't really have a clue what I was doing, but now it's nice when it's nice for sure when a couple of those videos do hit off. Um, so give me a sec. The connection's really poor on my end.
This is so funny because
Sorry,
you're in a car park outside uni. It's amazing.
it's 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 actually also getting really really hot in here. Um,
O- Open the door or
well,
unwind the
I see
window.
I've got the window open, but the laptop's like completely like overheating on my leg over here. But yeah, like it's it is getting really hot. But yeah, no, it's awesome that like I'm learning as I make each video and
So
as it's
what are
going
you
along. But
learning?
well, I'm learning so much. Like that thing from the comments that come along, even just to realizing that like what people want from a TikTok. I realized just how ruthless it is. You know, it's like we came from a time where it's like people like watching movies and people will watch like all these long YouTube videos and stuff. But it's like on TikTok, it's like even a 30-second video is just too long. You know what I mean? Like I found that in the early videos I'd make, they'd be like a minute long, and the cuts would take quite a while, and people just swipe. And I noticed that actually, my shortest TikTok is like 8 seconds, and on average, I'll try and make it around 15, 16 seconds. Because even that's pushing the boundary. And I slowly learned that and realized, like, it's funny because someone looked at my TikTok and they were like, oh, well, you're not really putting much effort into it. It's like 10, 15 seconds. But it's like, I start with like, a minute, 2 minutes of footage or like a minute of footage. And you have to really edit it down. And you edit it down to like 25 seconds and then to 15 seconds. And you're still looking at like, how can I shave something off this video? So I actually spent quite a while editing it to take it to where it needs to be. And when I say that, it probably sounds like I'm like a master at doing this. At the end of the day, like I'm still so fresh, but it's like, I guess it's like learning just how ruthless the app is. And the other thing is the algorithm does mess with you. It definitely does mess with you, like for viewers, but even for people creating content. And that's why my heart kind of goes out to people who I guess want to do it as a career, because it's one of those things where you post at the wrong time, you don't do this hashtag, or just for some reason TikTok will be like, okay, for this video, we're going to give you 1 million views. And for this video, we're not going to give you any kind of coverage. And it kind of, I heard some experiment that was done. I don't know about it for sure, but it was something along the lines of they had these rats in a cage, and they basically had this button that they would press. Um, and I'm actually not sure if we might have spoken about this in India. I can't remember, but it's basically like they had, for one experiment, every time the rats pressed the button, they would get food. But then, so what would happen is they would only press food when they're kind of hungry, when they want. But then they changed it up, and what they would do is when they pressed the button, it would randomly give food sometimes, and it randomly wouldn't. So when that would happen, the rats would just keep pressing it and keep pressing it, because it's almost like that kind of gambling kind of game that you get into. And it's the same thing for viewers, but for people creating content, it's that same thing. You make a video, it goes big, wow. And then your next one, it doesn't go big at all. And TikTok kind of does that to you. And through research as well, it's what I've noticed. Um, so it's been really interesting, and it's cool to step away from your day to day kind of uni life. It's it's such a stock standard pathway I'm going through at the moment with the work, your general semesters, and I kind of enjoy having this kind of creative outlet on the side. And it's almost like it's like a mini game I'm trying to play against TikTok. So I really do enjoy it.
Nice.
Yeah.
Okay, should we talk about how you grew up?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I guess what do you want to know? Like from before I was born or just my general childhood?
Whatever you want to share. But and then
Awesome.
I want to talk about some as long as your laptop doesn't die or you don't get kicked out by uni security or something, to talk about how you got involved in Man Up.
In Mount, absolutely.
Or
So
will the work you're doing with men's mental health?
yeah. So I guess yeah, look, 2022 now, born in 2002 in New Zealand. Come from obviously an Indian background. So my parents moved out of India. They studied medicine, both of them, and they're doctors right now. So they left India. They did their medicine in the US. My brother was born then, and then they moved to New Zealand, and I was actually born in New Zealand. And from there, they had the option. I think they've got a job offer in either Perth or Canada, I think it was. And there were two reasons, and obviously two very different places. You know, Perth, Western Australia, to Canada, and they ended up choosing Perth because I think one, it was closer to home, for closer to home being India, because Dad's parents weren't doing too well at that time. So that was one factor, and the other factor was the weather. So they were like, "There's a better climate in Perth, so let's head over there." Um, so yeah, we came, and I guess like most immigrant kind of stories, it's that same kind of almost cliche vibe, but truthfully, it was like that. That mum and dad really didn't have much. They came here knowing no one, with nothing much at all, with kind of big debts to pay off. Um, and they really worked hard. They really, really worked damn hard. And my brother and I went to a local primary school here called Hollywood Primary School, which was next to the hospital, which was Hollywood Hospital, where mum and dad were training. Um, and yeah, from there, like they slowly built up their life. And then I went to this school called Christchurch Grammar School, which was it's a really good boys' private school here. And I think that was a big aim for mum and dad. Again, for parents in general, but especially for immigrant parents, it's always that thing of put your kids first. And no matter what, it's like we want to give our kids the best possible education. And that's exactly what happened. Like, regardless of the money on hand or this or that, they always put us first. So really lucky in that way. Because I guess some of the work that I'm lucky enough to be doing now with some cool organizations, we do work with a lot of kids who I realize, wow, like I had so much more than these kids growing up. And I guess I do, yeah, sometimes you do feel a bit guilty, but it is also good to have that awareness. Because, yeah, I'll be honest, like, I look back on my childhood growing up. I'm 20 years old now, but I feel like I've had the best childhood. I've had such a, like, supportive, functional family. A great older brother who, again, like, is just cared for me so much since day one. And so many great family friends around me, school friends, um, Indian friends, and I guess being in a place like Perth, Western Australia, your kind of community, your family friends around you, they become like your extended family because the rest of our family is back in India. Um, so I guess that kind of, yeah, look, I guess to start off by saying, awesome childhood. And in fact, I hadn't really gone through that much of a struggle. There was never really a really traumatic life event that I'd had throughout my whole of high school. Um, until last year, I think last year was a huge flip in my life. And that was because one of my best mates, Michael, he took his own life in March of last year. And it was, yeah, everything just really changed. Having gone through high school in such a protective environment where everything's served for you on a plate, you really relatively don't have too much to go. It's a generalization, but there was never really much of a struggle for me. And everything was going so smoothly. We were about 2 weeks into the start of our uni journey with Michael, and I think the main thing was on our mind. That was on our mind was, oh, you know, when are we going to get a girlfriend, or like which clubs are we going to join, where are we going to hang out. These were the biggest worries that we had. But yeah, it all changed. There was a lot that happened. Michael was struggling, I think, after school finished, and him and his girlfriend broke up, and that was in January, and his mental health really started to take a downfall. And it was midway through February that there was a big incident that happened between him and his ex-girlfriend, and our whole friend group as a whole, to be honest. And a week later, he took his own life. And I remember finding out. I'd come back from a drama rehearsal that night, because the week later I was meant to be in a drama production. And I remember my mum, my dad, my brother were like waiting for me at the front of the house with like a glass of water. And when I when I walked into the house, it was such a strange feeling, because I was like, why? Like, I thought I was going to get shouted at. I genuinely thought, they were like, come sit down. And I was just, in that moment, I was thinking to myself, what have I done? I was trying to go through my brain thinking, what am I about to get toasted for? And then they sat me down, and my mum was like, we have something to tell you. And she said, Michael. And the thing is, before she even finished what she said, before she even said that Michael's taken his own life, I stood up from my seat, and I just knew. And it was in that moment that, like everything, just like everything in the past few months, within a split second, it just clicked into place. And within that 1 second, like the amount of thoughts that went through my mind was crazy. And I knew in that moment, and I knew after that this is where everything changed. And it hurt a lot, the fact that I knew what she was going to say before she even said it. I think it definitely, I carried around a lot of guilt after that, because I thought the fact that I wasn't surprised. I think you hear a lot of people were quite surprised, more in shock to hear when someone has taken their own life. But for me, I think the fact that I knew that he was capable of it is what really hurt. And look, I'm in a position now where I definitely carry a lot less guilt, but I guess it's still always there. But it's also what drives me today, because all these months on, my life's in a much different, I would almost say a much better position. For the first few months thereafter he passed away, I completely shut off from everyone, from everything. But then I was pretty lucky in that way, because later on in the year, I ended up jumping on board with this amazing organization called Man Up, which was set up by two amazing guys, Gareth Shantakumar and Hasib Riaz. You obviously spoke on a recent episode with Gareth. And it was an organization that was basically created to tackle the misogynistic culture which exists a lot, especially in boys' private schools. Two, to teach, furthermore, to teach boys about healthy relationships with women, with family, with friends. And at the core of it, I think just getting boys to talk more. That whole concept of Man Up, when we ask the boys at the start of our sessions, we basically go into schools and we run these workshops with them. Rather than like presenting to them with a PowerPoint, we kind of have open conversations with them around what it means to be a man. And we ask them at the start of our sessions, what does it mean to man up? And we'll have boys tell us, it means to be strong, it means to get up, it means for men not to cry. And as we go through this session, we kind of really break down, and the whole aim is to change the meaning of what it means to man up. Man up stereotypically means, going head first at a contest in a footy match, brushing it off when you get hit, when you fall down, not showing any emotions, but trying to change that into the meaning that manning up means to have those difficult conversations, to talk to each other about your emotions, because that's something that my friend group with Michael, it's something we never did. Even to this day, talking about our feelings. And it's not just our group. I think our group was very symbolic of the wider society, where men just are told that they can't talk about this stuff. And I always have that belief that had I been a part of Man Up earlier, had we had Man Up come and spoken to us, we could have had a different group culture. And I genuinely believe that Michael could still be here. So it's amazing to be part of that organization now. I think it's been really good for my healing. And a lot of the boys that do it, it's amazing. We all do it for our own reasons. Everyone's got their own story, their own reason why. But I guess it's special because we're all bounded by that same kind of vision, that same thing that we want to achieve. And it's really special in that way. In fact, tomorrow we're leaving on a rural trip for 8 days around Western Australia, around the southwest, to hit all these schools. And it's especially important that we are going to the rural settings because the suicide rate outside of the metro area is double, and a lot of the schools out there in WA, they're very isolated, like a lot of funding, a lot of staff. They're almost the schools that need it the most. And we've been lucky enough to have gotten state funding recently. So it's now really, really opened up our doors. And going into 2023, it's going to be huge for us. So yeah, this trip itself is a huge step forward for us to continue these conversations. And soon the aim will be to take Man Up to a national level. I could just talk all day about it. It's such an amazing organization, and I think there's a lot of good that we can do moving forward. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. So what are the main things you've learned about since being there, especially in terms of like how it ties in with you and your healing after Michael's death?
The main thing that I've learned, it's a tough one. I think I learned a lot about. Look, I mean, the whole concept of mental health, for starters, I've learned so much about around suicide prevention, around how to have these conversations. I think I was also able to reflect a lot on the way I dealt with Michael's passing and still do. I think I learned a lot on a very personal level there. Like, I think I was really judgmental about everyone and everything after he passed away. I felt, this friend didn't support me. I felt, how can this friend react in that way to his passing? Do they not care? I think Man Up has definitely helped me to mature a lot, in ways that I probably don't know. I think what I didn't realize after Michael passed away is that there's no textbook on how to grieve. No, in school we get taught how to solve equations, how to write an essay, but we never really taught, how to deal with loss, how to talk to someone who might be having suicidal thoughts. And I think it's what we say to a lot of the boys, at least what I say in my sessions I run with the boys, that in school it's amazing, you'll learn all these skills, but the most important thing in your life, are your relationships. The relationships with the people you care about, the relationships with yourselves. And I think that's one of the key things I've realized. It's funny when you go to schools, you kind of look at these kids and you can't judge them for it, but you realize, wow, that they're so close-minded. And I was like that exactly, especially at my school. When I was at year 12, all people cared about was getting an honor blazer, which was if you do enough co-curricular activities, you get this shiny like braid around your blazer, and it was like that was everything everyone wanted. And I guess you kind of just realize when you leave school and from experiences like this that there's a much bigger world out there. There's a lot more important things. So yeah, like I struggle to probably nail it down to one thing. What have I learned through Man Up? Is that what you kind of meant, or you more meant to the content or through talking to boys?
I guess, well, how do you, so you're obviously in a much better place now than you were immediately afterwards. Yeah, I guess because so when we met, what morning? It was like the second morning in India in this.
When we went for that walk.
Yeah, we went for that walk. And how did it come up? I don't know. You were talking about your TikToks. And then
Yeah.
for some reason, we ended up realizing that both of us had this, I guess it's this bond you have with anyone who's been affected by suicide. And yeah, it's just this tragic thing to have in common with someone. But you were so, it was great how open you were. Like straight away, you were like, here's a photo of Michael on your phone screen. You talked about it so confidently, openly, what happened, and the work you were doing and why you found it important. Were you? I just think that's so good that you were able that you do talk so openly, and I guess that's exactly what we're doing on this podcast. Like, there's no reason to feel like any shame or awkwardness around it.
No.
Were you always that open, or has that happened through Man Up that you've become more confident about talking about your feelings?
I think I was always pretty open with it, and I think that's what I mean by being judgmental. I think for me, when I was grieving, I thought that the way I was grieving was the only and right way to grieve, because I really wanted to talk about it. I really wanted to share his memory. I really wanted people to know who he was, and to be honest, most of my other friends, it's not that they didn't want to, but I guess for a lot of people, when something like that happens, they just need their own personal space, you know? And that's, I think what I realized is that everyone grieves so differently. But yeah, right from the get-go, I don't know why, I really wanted to talk about him. I think he very quickly became my comfort zone, if you know what I mean. Despite how difficult it was to lose Michael, how difficult it is, his kind of thought, everything to do with him became just what I was comfortable with. And maybe that's just a coping mechanism. There have been like people who are close to me have also kind of hinted at the fact that, like, hey, like, are you making Man Up and Michael's kind of identity too much of your personality, kind of thing? You know, they were like, you've got so many other things in your life that make up who you are. Do you not have other things to kind of talk about? And I was kind of like, yeah, I guess it's a good point, but I was always open about it before, right? As soon as I came to Man Up, part of the reason why I was so keen to get into Man Up is because I wanted to talk about Michael. It was a perfect space to talk about Michael and to use a story to share it with the boys, because I had this big aim that, you know, I didn't, you know, everyone always has that aim, but, you know, I didn't want to lose another Michael. I didn't want another boy like me to have his friend and go through the exact same thing. So yeah, despite that whole notion of do I talk too much about him? You know, if you look at my Facebook or my Instagram post and stuff, you'll find there's just so much of stuff around Michael. But I guess I'm proud of his memory, and I guess I'm proud of, like, this is my kind of my purpose. I feel of what I enjoy doing. The boys I get to go on this journey with around me at Man Up, I care about them so much. And in fact, at the start, for me, it was just about the content of what we do. But it's opened my world to such an amazing and supportive community of boys who want to do the same thing. I've had kind of family, friends in the community, because obviously, again, I've probably touched on it in my TikToks, but the whole thing of academics being such an important thing. And again, I've had family, friends kind of question me on, do you want to be doing more with your academics? Like, if they've been like, oh, it's cool that you're doing this Man Up stuff, but don't forget about the main purpose of your academics. And I guess I'm kind of in that phase now where I'm like, I guess there's some truth in it. I do need to fulfill my obligations, you know, with my academics, but I just feel like Man Up is a lot more important than that to me. And I think it's yeah, different people find their purpose, and for me, I don't see myself holding back on it anytime soon. It is genuinely what drives me. I think it's cool having these TikToks on the side, and it's cool having uni and stuff. But what I'm proud about, what kind of makes me feel like, you know what, I'm happy with the road I'm on, is the fact that I get to be around this work. I get to be around Michael's memory, whether or not that's healthy or not, you know.
Well, do you feel like you're making an impact?
Sorry, you broke up again there.
Do you feel like you're making an impact with your
Oh, I
work at
definitely
Man
do.
Up?
I definitely do. Some of the programs that I've been part of, that people have been part of, different types of mentoring programs, you don't often see the change straight away. And it's like that at Man Up as well. It's like when you do have these conversations with people, you're naive to think I can go in there, say this, and it changes instantly. Change happens over time, but we genuinely can see that change, and it's amazing to see that change in just one session. And I think the biggest changes we see are in our final session. We run a male culture session around what it means to be a man, a relationship session around boundaries and consent, and our final one is coping, where we do this activity where we get the boys, and ourselves included, to basically write on a mental health reflection sheet a time we or someone we knew struggled, and we write about that for 10 minutes. And then we basically come back in a circle and share that with one another. And there's no pressure to share, but it's always the most effective ones are always when boys open up. And sure, there are some sessions where no one says anything. I mean, in fact, we literally will sit there for like just 5 minutes of straight silence. And it's amazing to sit with year nine boys who at the start of the session are just cracking all these jokes and just, they're just there for the bands. They're like, oh, this is a free period kind of thing. To be able to sit there with a bunch of year nines and everyone just sit there in silence and respect the kind of space we're in, that in itself is amazing. Um, but then it's great when boys start sharing, and it creates that domino effect. And that it's so we always have bad domino effects in our lives, where one thing leads to another, which leads to another. But this is one of the best domino effects I've seen, where one boy opens up and shares something. Suddenly the next one. And you've been in sessions sometimes with people putting up their hands like it's a wait list to be like, I want to speak next. And the change you see in that session, in that 20 minutes, is huge, because it genuinely does change things for that cohort of boys moving forward. Suddenly you see all the social hierarchy break down. Schools revolve around that social hierarchy. Like, everyone knows in schools, you have your different groups of people. This person doesn't like this person's more popular. In that moment where everyone's like vulnerable and shares, someone will talk about parents' divorce, someone talks about someone they know passing away, someone talks about the stresses, and it clicks in these boys' minds that, holy shit, wait a minute, despite all these social differences, we are all the same. I can relate to that kid. I can relate to them, and instantly, despite having been through years of schooling with these people, that 20-minute conversation changes things. And that's why I'm a big believer that it's not your time that matters with someone, it's your experiences that really matter. And I think just a simple activity like that, you see the change there. And yeah, but I guess from a broader point of view, yeah, like the simple question you asked me is, are you guys making an impact? And 100%, I think in indirect ways. It's cliche, but it's like just one boy who's you get to kind of change their mind about getting them to start a conversation with their mate. Like, that also creates a domino effect, and it flows on into those communities. And that's why it's special to go around WA and run these sessions, because there are many remote towns where you can almost see that mini footprint you're leaving. And we come back the next year and we'll see that same cohort a year later. And it's happened to us before, where we've had teachers reach out to us and be like, we're already noticing the change in the boys. So that kind of stuff is what makes us realize that we're on the right track, Yeah.
Yeah. So then can you see that how much Michael's death impacted you is now having a positive change in the world? Like, even though it's, too late to save Michael, you are having an impact on all these other people. And so it's okay that, so that when people are maybe like telling you those things that are you too obsessed about this, you can say, well, actually, I'm doing this really impactful work. And you're still
Yeah.
doing, you're doing, your TikToks are like nothing to do with this. They're just hilarious and like bring joy to literally hundreds of thousands of people, based on the numbers. And then you're still keeping up with your uni.
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's one of those things. I mean, people will say everything happens for a reason. Now, I don't think that Michael's passing happened for a reason, because I'd 100% trade all of this just to see him one more time. You know what I mean? But I do genuinely think, I hope he'd be proud. I really do hope he'd be proud. And whatever, whatever good I feel like I can do personally, no matter how big or small, it's all in Michael's name. Like whenever I do it, to me, yeah, I just feel like I'm doing it for Michael, and I feel like, yeah, it's all in his name. And I really am genuinely proud of it. And to answer your question again about, it kind of doesn't help me sleep at night, despite what my family friends say. Absolutely. Because I guess for some of them, they probably haven't seen the man up sessions. They probably haven't seen some of the conversations. So they probably don't realize how special it is. And maybe they would see it and be like, oh, well, there's still not that much great in it. But to me, I see so much greatness in it. And words can't explain to, I once had a kid come up to me when we were in Bunbury, which is it's southwest of Western Australia. And there was this kid in the session. He came up to me at the end, and he was like kind of in tears. And he said to me, and this kind of another thing with grief is that when I'm talking about Michael consciously, it's a comfort zone. But this kind of really hit me out of nowhere. And I think a lot of people who have grieved the loss of someone can relate to that feeling of where it just hits you out of nowhere. And I finished this session, and this boy came up to me, and I was just thinking about, we're going for lunch soon. And I was like, that's the session done, went well. And he came up and he was like, I just want to let you know that. And we had a pretty deep conversation in that session, but he was like, I just want to let you know that I think your friend Michael would be really, really proud of you. And I literally just like broke down on the spot when he said that, because it just meant the world to me. And to this day, that is probably one of the things that meant the most to me, because I kind of felt like it was Michael saying it to me himself, and I always, as I'm going through Man Up and just life in general, I ask myself, what would Michael say about this? Would he really be proud of me? I say he'd be proud, but would he be proud? But just that reassurance to be told by someone else, to not have to be told by myself that, yeah, I'm on the right path. It was damn special. It it really meant the world to hear that from this kid, for sure. And getting, I've had a couple of TikToks that have done awesome, and gotten so many, like thousands of likes, thousands of views. And it's nice to get those little, pieces of affirmation from the world. But like all of that combined genuinely compares nothing to this one comment that was made by this kid,
Yeah.
Probably make it sound like when I'm talking, it maybe sounds like I'm saying like I'm some great bloke who's doing like great things, like I'm some descendant of God or something, like, you know what I mean? Like I'm probably pumping myself up a bit too much, but I guess, yeah, for me, this is something I care about a lot, and these kinds of experiences are genuinely special to me. So yeah.
No, you're not at all. It's the same thing why I'm doing this podcast, or, part of this podcast, because then there's obviously like the like with Peter Costello, we weren't talking about this vulnerable stuff. But that's what I said in my intro, which was like, so like it was totally unscripted and unplanned. And I am just talking about, oh, this is why I want to bring it into the world. And now I feel like a bit like, oh, why did I have that as my intro? But it's like, that is me, that's coming from the heart,
Yeah.
that's what's helped me when I've been struggling, is hearing other people be vulnerable. And that's what I believe. And I'm the same as you. It's like the one message from someone that's like, I've experienced this, and like, thank you for talking about this. That's
Yeah.
what's so, like, that's the reward in itself, to be like, okay, one person's, like, if one single person can feel better about themselves and cannot have to suffer in that way.
Yeah.
And it's like, it's genuine. And if there is some guilt, but hopefully you're working through, because yeah, I know you had like a lot of guilt as well as anger, right? And a real sense of justice, because it's not fair what happened, and it's horrible, like all that stuff with, well, yeah, just nasty, I guess you can call it bullying, but really nasty stuff that goes on, and that then a young person ends up taking their life, and you can never get to the person's gone. It's so, for something to come to that point, it's so, so tragic. But and it's so complicated, right? And you can actually never get the answers because that person isn't there anymore.
Yeah.
So I think, yeah, the fact that you had this real sense of justice and you wanted to like fight for your friend on his behalf because he was no longer there, so you're kind of doing that for him. But it seems like you're learning so much, and it's just a process, right? It's the process of grief. And
Yeah.
but I hope you can work through this guilt. Like, I experienced it as well with my brother, because I think everyone does who's around someone, because it's like, what could you have done differently? But you can't think like that. You can't, there's nothing you could have done. And it doesn't, and yet holding that guilt could just make you feel worse. And yeah, as you were, and it's like you can't function, and then you're hurting your own health. But what you've turned this into is something really positive, when you're like, okay, now I can help other people.
Yeah. Yeah. Absolutely. And as you said, you've experienced it as well on a very deep level. But it's like suicide. Every death tears holes in the community, but especially something like suicide. It creates so much destruction. Like that mental, that ripple effect that it creates. It's heartbreaking. It really is. But then it's so good to be able to do this, like to then create a positive ripple effect from it, like the work we're doing now to kind of reverse that ripple effect to help other people. It is really special, and for you, like I really respect like what you're doing as well, like with this podcast, like getting people on to talk about this, like spending that time with you in India on that trip, definitely opened my eyes as well, because you're someone who I realized, I was like, wow, Delia, if she wants something, she gets it. You know what I mean? Like, you set out a goal, a vision for yourself, and that's what you're doing. And I was like, I really respected that. I think that was one of the biggest takeaways that I took from you, which was just that kind of like a mini dog with a bone to like keep chasing. And I was like, yeah, at the end of the day, everyone's gonna care about their own things in life, their own passions. And I think it taught me, yeah, that if this is what I care about, I should go full speed in that direction. You know, so yeah, I'm really looking forward to everything there is to achieve ahead. I really am. Yeah.
So what are you thinking now about your future? Because in India, you're talking about medicine, I think.
Yeah, That is actually still very much the aim. But so the exam for that, the GAMSAT, it's called. It's a very long 5 hour exam. That's next year. So you can sit every March and September. So right now, but so that's for a postgraduate program. So right now I'm doing economics, which is my undergraduate degree. So I guess now the hard work starts. The uni semester's finished. Got quite a long uni break now, and my first target is to be sitting that in March. But technically, the way that, because I took a semester off last year after Michael passed away, um, that semester will kind of go on the end of my degree, and you can only hold on to your GAMSAT result for 2 years. So just the way it works, a long story short, is that my exam that I sit in March next year won't actually count. So the September one is the one that will. But yeah, that is definitely a goal for me ahead. And to be honest, a goal which I'm not sure would have come about if Michael didn't pass away. I think after he passed away, I was lacking a major career direction in terms of what I wanted to do. And I knew, but one thing that Man Up taught me as well is that this is what I love doing, like helping people in that way. But I guess that's the other thing. It sounds very cliche, to be like, I want to help people, so I'm going to go into medicine. But I thought at least it would give me that career drive to, and again, life is so short. You got to push yourself. You miss 100% of the shots you don't take. So this is now a goal which I have set out, which I haven't really made much progress on. I'm really, we're having this this podcast now, but this is really now a goal which really starts for me as soon as I'm back from this Man Up trip. So I'm kind of at that next period where I am kind of turning into a new chapter moving forward. Because I definitely, as much as I love economics and stuff, I don't know if I could do it as a career. Yeah, and I think a lot of that has changed because of Michael's passing. So much as it's so interesting when you ask that question. Keeps living in my mind, even though it just got asked me 30 minutes ago, which is, what have you learned? I almost feel like two separate people from before Michael passed away to after he passed away, rather than what I learned from Man Up or what I learned from Michael's passing. Everything changed. My priorities, what I care about, the things I value most. Like, we did this exercise at Man Up with our founder, Gareth, where we had to talk about like our 5 key values from different things, from humor, enthusiasm, love, kindness, justice. And I was thinking about my values that I would have chosen before Michael passed away to now. And the ones that come up now are like your simple ones, like courtesy and justice, which are 2 big ones for me now. And justice comes about from, and when I say justice, I don't even mean justice on a grand scale. I just mean justice like small social justice, social, like in a group setting kind of thing. Like I care about it so much now that Michael passed away, because I feel like what happened to him wasn't just, he got really stitched up. That is something which I value to no end now. That sense, like, as in, if someone wrongs another person in our community, like, I would do anything to make sure that person has to rectify for what they've done. And I think having that mindset has cost me a bit in recent times as well. But it's something I really care about. And another thing I really care about now is just basic courtesy. Because, people always talk about being nice to others. But, sometimes in a superficial way. But I genuinely mean it, that it's so important to be nice to people. It is so important to, because unfortunately, you just never know what someone is going through. Having that basic respect and courtesy for someone, someone could have their bottle completely filled up to the brim from so many life struggles like divorce, loss, stress. But it could just be the final thing that tips them over the edge. And it happens a lot with people who end up taking their own life. It's like that final straw on the camel's back. And unfortunately for Michael, there were some people in his life who maybe wronged him at the end, which sent him over the edge. I think they know it better than anyone else, that despite what they did not really result in someone ending their own life, it was the final thing. So you just never know. Even in your friend groups, it's something we talk about a lot at Man Up. In our boys' culture, we're so big on taking the piss out of each other, especially in an Australian male culture. we love taking the piss out of each other. It's like our way of communication. It shows how strong our bond is, which is awesome. It's awesome. But sometimes jokes get taken too far. And that's the thing for someone who's so vulnerable, someone who's struggling and so insecure in themselves. What might seem like a harmless joke to you is actually something which eats them up. And it just adds to the burden that they're carrying. So those are just two things. Like, even to anyone who might be like listening to this, is like, I think just something simple to hammer forward is, justice is something which is personal to me, but just the simple thing of be nice to people. You don't have to be like overly nice for superficial reasons, but just always think to yourself, I don't know what this person might be going through. If you can have that mindset, I think if everyone had that mindset, it'd be a much better world. Yeah.
And on the justice point, are you learning the tools of how to, I guess, communicate in... there's this book you should read called Nonviolent Communication. It's amazing. But because it's the whole idea that you still have to have compassion for the other person who's done something wrong. Because if you then just turn and attack that person, then it just ends up, you're just launching another attack. So are you figuring out how to like in that small group setting, for example, if someone does something hurtful for someone else, are you learning the tools of how to intervene, but in a way that doesn't create more conflict or division, I guess?
I definitely think I am, and I think it's something which I'm learning right now. It's something which I probably learned a bit more about 3 weeks ago, where we had another issue in another friend group. But I think I'm very guilty of that whole concept of, when it comes to justice, despite me caring so much about it, I don't think I've gone about it in the best ways in the past. I am a very confrontational person and very much have that mindset of an eye for an eye. And I was actually just having a conversation with my friend, his name's Nish. I was having a conversation with him yesterday about this whole concept of justice. And I think in that conversation, I really learned that, yeah, I think it's awesome how much I care about the concept of justice, but maybe I could refine the way I go about it. So it's kind of funny that you asked me this question now, because I'm currently kind of in that process of asking myself, it's awesome that I care so much about this, but yeah, I think I need to change the way I go about it rather than being so confrontational. Because then at the end of the day, what's the difference between if someone has wronged that person and then I'm like, I'm going to wrong this person now? Kind of just adding to the chain of people wronging people. It's kind of like what every West Australian primary school teacher will say to their classroom, which is two wrongs don't make a right kind of thing. I guess that's kind of the concept I'm kind of grappling with. So yeah, still trying to figure that one out, I'll probably say to you. Yeah.
Because to your second thing that you value, which is showing courtesy to everyone, being kind to everyone, that includes the people who have committed some wrongdoing, right? According to your second rule, like, they still deserve respect. And you don't know how much they could be struggling. Like, they are probably causing pain to someone else because they're in pain. Not that it's right what they're doing.
No, what you're saying is actually 100% right. Not that was your intention, but you've definitely kind of put a hole in what I was saying, because I was kind of just like coming from a very high position of, be nice to everyone. I kind of look back on what's happened, and in the past 3 situations in my life, which have been big ones to be honest, where someone has been wronged, I've gone very hard at the person who's kind of wronged them. And I guess there's that kind of thing. Well, I guess I haven't been considerate towards what that person's going through. So absolutely, I think it's definitely something to reflect on. I think I personally really like. I kind of like my confrontational nature in a way, in that fact of like, sometimes I feel like people aren't brave enough to face the difficult situations and stand up for what's right. And I definitely think the times that I hate myself the most are the times where I'm like, I did not stand up for that person. That's the kind of things that eat me up. Like there was this incident happened earlier in the year, and I honestly ate me up for all this time that a month ago I finally said something about it because I just couldn't live with the fact that I didn't say anything. But again, as you said, the way I went about it, probably not correct. But then I'll probably ask you, Delia, I'm like, in that situation, well, how do you go about it? Someone has wronged someone that you care about. How do you go about it without kind of firing back at that person? And you know what I mean? How would you go about it?
So this is like the difference between assertiveness and aggression. So aggression is like this primal, it's like your first response. You want to attack. It's like from your animal part of your brain. And that's when you accuse or you criticize or you use you statements like you did this. Whereas assertiveness is more about having boundaries. So for yourself, it's like you're expressing your needs. So you're saying, I need X, Y, and Z. You've got to read this book. It's really good because it's literally, it's changing the way you speak, and it's incredible. He did it in like major conflict area, you know, from like Israel, Palestine to just in the home, like a mum fighting with her kid about leaving socks on the floor. But it's literally by changing the way you communicate, the results are amazing. And then you have the desired result you're looking for is peace and harmony, right? So if you want to just attack someone, you're trying to create more conflict, right? So, but then it's like this is why meditation really helps, because it can slow your reaction time, and like you get a sense of, you know, when that anger's rising within you, and then you become aware of it, and it's like, where is this coming from? And I think when you have a desire to protect someone else, I think you have to be careful there, because it's like, why am I stepping in on behalf of someone else? Like what? Because they have agency as a human as well. And it can be quite tricky. But yeah, I used to probably be like you, like, confrontational, want to set things right. And it's a lot of learning and like constant. And in the end, it's like, what do you want? Do you want? Everyone's trying to get their needs met, basically. So it's like, how do you do that in a way that you're not hurting other people and you're not hurting yourself?
Yeah, it's interesting. You kind of talk about that needs thing. Maybe a bit separate to what you were saying. I'll come back to that. But I always feel like sometimes I go extra hard at people, Delia. Like, because in a subconscious way, I'm kind of trying to make up for not standing up for Michael. Do you know what I mean? Like, there's just some recent situations where someone has done something and I've gone so hard with not that assertiveness, but that aggression. And I think it's, in hindsight, it's probably because I carry a big chip on my shoulder about the Michael thing. And so that same whole thing about, like, I don't want to make that same mistake again, constantly trying to make amends for what happened then. But yeah, I like what you said about, so what you're saying is the difference between assertiveness and aggression is the way you communicate it, basically. You're talking about, is that essentially the key difference between the two?
Okay, I'm not an expert on this. This is literally my therapist taught me this the other day. But it's like, aggression, it's like you're attacking. It's like, you did this, you wronged me, you blah, blah, blah. But being assertive is like, I don't, like, you must learn that when you're doing the consent stuff or whatever, right? It's like, it's communicating what you need. Like, I don't want to have sex, for example, is different to saying, you blah blah blah. People switch off when you say you to someone, like you're doing this, people perceive that as an attack and then they shut down or they respond with an attack. Whereas if you just are communicating something about yourself, whereas if you say to me right now, Delia, you're talking too much and you're ruining my day, that I'm going to like be defensive or like, you know, whereas if you say, I'm feeling tired, can we stop talking? I'll be like, oh, of course. Like, you know?
Yeah.
It's just
100%.
it's how the person responds.
Yeah. 100%. Just to like throw out a statistic that we use at Man Up as well, which I actually still don't know if this statistic has much bearing, but it's like 37% of relationship breakdowns are a result of a lack of communication, or not a lack of communication, but yeah, from poor communication. 37% of relationship breakdowns. But then, is that statistic? If I look at that, I'm like, is that saying much? Like, is it actually way higher than in real life, or?
I feel
What are
like,
your thoughts?
communication is so in the workplace as well. For, all relationships, romantic relationships with your family, with your friends, in the workplace as well, colleagues, whatever, people you're working with, your boss. Communication is so important, but it's like we just don't learn how to do it. And
Like,
you end up with people who can't communicate at all. They just shut down. You end up with people, who are probably more maybe to the side you're saying that you're leaning on, which is like you're able to do it, but maybe you're doing it in a way that ends up that you don't really feel good about how you did it.
Yeah, I'd almost say that 99% of relationships happen. 99% of relationships break down due to poor communication. Because I guess the whole thing is that technically, in a way, it's not really that bigger, but in a way, if we can communicate in an effective way to each other, there's no real need for like a relationship to completely break down, if you know what I mean. Do you agree with that?
Sometimes relationships end, like you just might not be suited to someone, but it doesn't have to end in a. I don't think there's any reason for someone to be like struck out of your life completely. Like nothing has to blow up. As in, you can not want to spend time with someone anymore. That's totally fine. But it doesn't have to end with aggression and like blocking each other or violence. Basically, it's like learning how to, that's why this book's called Nonviolent Communication. It's like, this is where violence comes from, because you can't communicate and then people resort to violence, which is not what we want. And that's what, that's what we had when we were in the Himalayas on a walk, and it was like this conversation turned.
Gosh.
But there is there's anger around stuff in political issues, in like issues about the environment, where people talk about wanting to hurt other, people talk about these people should suffer, or these people should die, or if you vote for this political party, like you should die. Like there was a Australian comedian who was then like banned from an event because he was like, but it's like, it's not threatening violence on people because they don't agree with you. That's really the other thing I'm trying to do with this podcast, show like you can talk to people who have different views to you, and it's okay. Like you don't have to physically hurt people or emotionally hurt people who think differently to you.
100%. I think that's also an issue that exists in our society, which a lot of people feel, but it's like we're kind of getting to a stage where we can't have honest conversations. It's kind of like everyone has to think in the one specific way. And I genuinely, some of the conversations that I personally value the most are the ones where people have different views to the rest of society, despite when being politically incorrect. I just think they're so interesting, and too often people are so quick to shut down a different view and say that's wrong, it's politically incorrect, or you can't say this. But it's like, again, as a form of communication, we can actually learn so much by just listening to a different point of view, even if it's the complete wrong thing. Like if someone comes up to me and is like someone, there have been people who are like, man up, what you guys do is shit. You guys are turning men into women. Men should be working, not someone. We had an open day stall, and someone was like, men should be sitting around here talking about this. You guys should be out working, doing this stuff. And I was actually really
Who said
interested.
that?
Or just some random member of public. There was this other thing I did where someone was
like an older man.
yeah. And some other bloke was like, yeah, you're teaching men to be weak and this and that. But I actually feel like I was really intrigued actually to like know more, to have that conversation. Because at the end of the day, it's like, I know that I don't really give a shit what this guy thinks, but I just think it's interesting. Like someone coming with that kind of view, it's actually really, this is controversial to say again, but once I had a friend who was saying, actually the Taliban isn't that bad, and they're actually doing a lot of good stuff. And despite me not believing that one bit, I had a really good conversation with him for like an hour about it, because I was like, there's so much to learn from this, just to hear the other side. Or even someone to say what Hitler, there was a lot of good to what Hitler did. Of course, like the complete opposite.
Who
You know
said
what I
that?
mean? No one said that, but someone actually said the Taliban thing. But someone once in school, someone said Hitler was one of the greatest leaders. Hitler was one of the greatest leaders to exist. And what he meant was more his leadership skills. But that conversation got shut down instantly. But what this guy was trying to say was that his leadership skills were so powerful. And when I listened to this guy, I was like, he's actually right. He's actually right that Hitler's public speaking skills, I wish I had Hitler's public speaking skills. Forget what he did and what he was on about. His public speaking, to be able to engage people like that, was amazing. And with this Taliban thing, after talking to my mate about it, I still didn't really agree with anything he said. I think his point was that they kill people who do drugs and stuff. And his point was that, like, oh, that's good. And in my mind, I was like, okay, dude, like, I still don't believe you. But I just think that if by like opening up your mind and hearing the other side, if anything, can help you realize more that, okay, my views are actually correct. But the society we live in, I just don't think you can have these conversations.
Well, you have the ability to influence the person, because now you're hearing his views that he thinks people who take drugs should die or whatever it is. And then you can gently ask questions like, oh, like, I mean, this is like hopefully you do it in a better way than this, but being like, oh, like if your child took drugs, then you would be happy for them to, but if you ask in like a gentle way, and then you can get them to reconsider like, oh, maybe killing people for their behavior isn't the right thing, and maybe I've been a bit black and white, and where does that come from? And on the Hitler thing, it's important to understand that this man rose to power and ended up murdering 6 million Jewish people in the Holocaust. How did that happen? Like, it is so important that we understand, how did this happen to make sure these things don't happen in the future? So that's why it's very important to understand history, and by not being able to have a conversation about people who have done bad things, I don't know, that's just not that's being silent about these things isn't really helpful. So I think with the Taliban, you did the right thing. You and your brother are very good at that. In India, you ask so many questions, that you lead with curiosity. It's not like an attacking way. It's just like you're trying to learn, and you ask lots of questions, and that's how you get people to open up, and then you understand their perspective.
Like absolutely, I think it's something which I want to try live by because I think someone like my brother does that so well, and like you said as well that like you can put the question back on them by having that conversation. You can open up your friend who believes that Taliban is good into thinking, oh, actually maybe they're not. And in the same way at Man Up, one of the to bring it back to Man Up, because that's our interaction with the education system. So many times you get people coming in with presentations and just talking at the boys and the girls and say, this is the way to live. And even teachers in general, this is what you should do. You shouldn't do this. We're talking about communication before. It all comes down to communication. As soon as you talk like that, with that kind of, that view of this is what you should do. You shouldn't do this. Very blatant, blunt. It's like no one's going to want to listen. They're just going to feel attacked. When someone comes out and when that guy comes and says men should be working, what are you doing? And we fight back and like, no, why is that person going to want to open their mind? It's like by sitting in a conversation and being like, okay, these are your views. Um, Tell us about it. I just feel like you can make a lot more progress. I mean, at Man Up, we do a lot of work where we look at homophobia, and we obviously believe at Man Up that that it's completely fine to be gay. But we have boys in the sessions who'll be like, oh, gay people. We ask a question to these boys where they have to agree or disagree, and we say it is weird for a straight man to be friends with a gay man. And you step in if you agree, or you step out if you disagree. And boys who step in, they'll be like, "Yeah, it's fucking weird, bro. It's like, oh, you can't be friends with like a gay guy. Like they're gonna want to like hook up with you, bro." But like one of the big things that the founders at Man Up go on about is like in that situation, you don't just shut down the boy. We unpack it. Be like, well, why do you feel that way? Hear their views. And what I've found is like it's such a good teaching style because there are so many boys who have been able to get them to think for a second and be like, actually, yeah, maybe there's nothing wrong. In the same way that a straight guy can be friends with a girl, with a straight girl, um, technically, in a way, they're both attracted to each other, but it doesn't mean they just hook up with each other. It's like simple things like that. Um, which, yeah, so
Do
I guess
you
it comes down to, sorry?
do you ever have boys who don't want to participate or who are really resistant to what you're
Yeah.
trying to get them to do?
Absolutely. All right, from the start sessions, but often a lot of boys just, they're clearly having issues with the other people and the other boys in their year and don't want to be part of the session for those reasons. Sometimes, yeah, we definitely do have boys who don't want to know the first thing about it. And it's so clear when you talk to these young kids that at the end of the day, we're all brainwashed at the age by our parents. That what these kids are saying about what it means to be a man, what they're saying about women, what they're saying about the whole concept of the LGBTQI plus community, you can tell, oh, these guys don't really realize what they're saying. They're kind of just regurgitating what they've heard at home from their parents. And in a way, you can't blame them for that. You really can't. And if that's their view at the end of the day, that is their view. But we actually enjoy walking into a session and talking to a rowdy group of boys. In fact, I feel like we find you can get a lot further with a group of rowdy boys who are at least willing to engage rather than like a group who just stays silent. Because at least these rowdy boys, what we do is like we spend the first 15 minutes just building rapport with them and getting to realize, we're not just this teacher who's going to sit here and shout at you. There's this big guy called Andrew Tate right now, who a lot of people would have heard of. And Andrew Tate says a variety of things. And we're working with that target audience, 15-year-old boys who watch him all the time on TikTok. And I think the thing with Andrew Tate is, again, if I go out into my community and say, if boys will say to me, oh, Varad, like, I can't actually, between you and me, like, I actually kind of like some of the things Andrew Tate says, but I can't say it because that's the truth. If you say it, you'll get shut down instantly.
What's an example of something he says?
Which is bad. Like he in a video, like he talks about very misogynistic things about teaching 15-year-olds how to like grab girls by the throat and stuff, and just things
Why?
that whatever a girl owns in a relationship should be ownership of the man. And you can ask the world about Andrew Tate. There's so many different takes on him. Some people say, oh
No,
yeah,
no,
he
no.
just
Yeah, yeah, yeah. I've heard about him. But what's the thing grabbing them by the throat?
or like just talking about, being a top G, being a real man is like, like you grab it, like kind of to show you're dominant in the relationship kind of thing. Like
Oh
just
my God.
these kinds of things. And that's the things that these boys see things like that and they think this is like legit, because the truth is that Andrew Tate, my opinion, he actually says there's a couple of things that he says are very true. There are things that
Like
he
what?
says which like there's certain things he says about which are about guys you know getting grilled for their views, or guys being told that they can't be who they are, or girls pouncing on guys, because the society we live in is where a girl can say something and a guy gets shut on for it instantly. And to be honest, I still don't know enough about him, but he's almost like, I don't know if he did what Hitler did, but in that way of like, there are so many guys in our society who feel like they've been shut on by girls, and he kind of almost preys on that insecurity. But then what
Mm,
happens is a lot of these young boys can't differentiate between, well, what is the stuff that he's saying which is good, and what is the stuff that he's saying which is bad. And so many of these boys will grab onto the good things, but not realizing that there is so much, honestly, so much stuff he says which is just terrible. It's heinous. But they think they
but
also see the money, the car he has, and they think he's a successful man. And the truth is, I don't think anyone can deny that in some form, some shape or another, he is successful. To go from, it depends what you define as successful, but from a monetary position, he has an insane business model. His business model is insane what he's done. And I think a lot
yeah,
of
my
people
my
look up to
friend
that.
was my friend was explaining how it works. Yeah, he's figured
Yeah.
out how to attract I mean, we're talking about him now. He's been on, it was, yeah, such big news, him getting banned from things, and then it meant he's on all these big TV shows and whatever, talk shows. But surely these young 15-year-olds can recognize that some of the violent things are not don't add up, right? If they're hearing, oh, you should grab a girl by the throat, I would hope that people can just realize like that's wrong to hurt someone physically.
Yeah, that's what we'd think, but I think especially boys at that age, what we've found is they're very impressionable. Another thing that comes into us in our culture session, we run a segment on porn, on pornography. And in this, we talk about how porn, what they show in real life, or what they show on the screen, is nothing like what it is in real life. And there's a statistic that 80% of porn depicts violence against women. So I guess that's the thing. It's like you're gonna do what you see in life, what you think is right. And for 14-year-old boys seeing things like Andrew Tate, at the end of the day, he's a role model. If I saw my role model go out and I don't know, just bash people up, or my role model drinking, or my role model Shane Warne bowling insane leg spinners, I'm gonna want to bowl like Shane Warne. If I see my role model do that, I'm going to want to be like him. You see, these boys make Andrew Tate into their role model, and he says to do this, and they do it straight away. And on the porn thing, is that's also why a lot of boys have such a poor relationship with women, because their first kind of understanding of a romantic relationship comes from porn, where a lot of the time, 80% depicts violence against women. And boys think that is just the way to treat women. That is the acceptable way to treat women. So then when a 15-year-old guy who's been watching porn already then listens to Andrew Tate saying this, in reality, it's nothing too shocking. He's kind of just regurgitating the same philosophies that this kid has learnt from porn. So
Huh.
it's really no
Okay, so
surprise
this
in
is
my
like,
eyes.
is this grabbing someone by the throat during sex
Yeah,
that
yeah.
he's
So I
saying?
should have kind of clarified. It was
Okay, okay,
around
okay,
that. It
okay,
was around
okay.
how you
Got it.
kind of like get with a girl, and it's like, yeah, just go, yeah. So it was one of those
Okay, because I
comments.
thought you were talking about like on the street or something, which I'm like, hopefully.
Nah, but I wouldn't be
But
surprised if
yeah,
Tate
yeah,
had
yeah.
said something along those lines. And I definitely
Okay.
wouldn't be surprised if a 15-year-old boy is like, yeah, that's that's what you need to do. Because Tate gives so much advice on what you need to do to make it big, what you need to do to get rich, what you need to do to have a big car.
Mm,
So then, of course, if he's saying that, they're just going to take for gospel everything else he says. But I
Well,
guess what that's
I'm so glad you guys are doing this work then. And hopefully, I mean, now I'm just thinking about this so much that's like, oh my God, how do we show people that this is a big problem? But I also
yeah.
feel like people talking about him, I mean, we're talking about him now, but it's
Mm,
like it gives more, I think him being platformed on like
mm,
massive talk shows of people being like, how bad is this guy? It's like
mm.
you're making him more famous. And we're literally talking about
That's
him now. So
true.
you could say it's the same thing. But I don't know, it's such a hard one. But it's
Mm,
definitely like, how do you have a counter influence so that, and you guys are doing that by talking to them and by teaching
exactly.
them, like, don't be violent
Exactly.
towards women.
And that's the thing, rather than
And
coming at
hopefully,
with an
do they
sorry?
listen to you?
Well, that's the
Do you
thing.
feel like
I
they're
think
listening to you, or are they like, nah, I don't believe you?
I think they do listen, and I'll tell you why. Because I think it's almost like when they say those views in their regular school settings or out in public, they get shut down for it instantly. I think a lot of them just value the fact that they get to have that honest conversation about it. Because when they do mention Andrew Tate, or say that word top G, it's such a Andrew Tate phrase to say, top G, and they'll talk about him. That's what we don't shut them down instantly. We'll unpack it and be like, well, let's talk about this. Let's hear your views and hear this side. And I think it genuinely does make them think. Because by telling a guy, shut up, don't talk about Andrew Tate, he's bad, don't listen to him. I guarantee you when he goes home that and Andrew Tate pops up, he's not going to stop him. In fact, if you tell a kid
Mm-hmm.
not to do something, they're probably going to want to do it just to piss you off. So yeah,
Mm.
by actually kind of taking that counter, by kind of absorbing the energy that they bring, kind of redirecting it a bit. Um, our aim there is not trying to get them to not mention the word Andrew Tate again. It's kind of sure, like mention him, look up to him in some ways, as long as you can look up to the right things. And I think it does make a difference. I think the simple thing, and I think Delia, you would have felt it. Like, obviously, we spent that time together in India, but it's like there are so many times where you were giving your views in a conversation, and it was just getting slaughtered and smacked down. But it's like the conversations where someone was actually kind of maybe willing to listen to you in that little food tent. Probably the conversations where you're more open to listen to maybe what is the other person saying, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. I feel bad for you in that conversation. A lot of those conversations. In fact, if anyone wants a workshop on poor communication, they should look at a they should look at a documentary of our whole trip together as a group. I mean, we had great fun, but uh, yeah, the communication there wasn't great, was it?
Yeah. But then I learned a big thing from that. It's like if people see the world black and white, if people aren't open-minded, if they're not willing to listen, um, then yeah, it's just a waste of time. There's no point.
Mm,
And that's the thing. There's this thing I always refer to that's like, if you enter a conversation, there's no chance that you will change your mind based on new evidence, then there's no point having the conversation. Like, if you're talking to someone
yeah,
who their views are so strong and it's like, I am right, I will never like move off this, then it's like you're just wasting your time.
yeah. Agreed, agreed. Yeah.
And I don't know, I think maybe having this platform helps with that, because I think I was, yeah, probably a bit like you, combative, and it's like I want everyone to hear this, like I want to be able to influence everyone or something like that. I don't know.
Mm,
And then it's like, where can I have the biggest impact? Which is like this.
yeah.
Yeah. And that's my thing. That's my thing with TikTok. So if it's like, okay, we're spreading like a good message that's like, we're learning, people can have different views, you can communicate honestly and openly, people are sharing vulnerability. hopefully this can help people. It's like, okay, well, there's people out there who are having a massive impact, like millions of people, like Andrew Tate, are hearing like dangerous stuff. So it's like, how can you counteract that? Well, you need to be on a platform that can create a massive audience, which is TikTok. So it's like, how do you drive? Because that has a bigger impact, right? Than me trying to convince one random like guy who's never going to change his mind. It's like,
Yeah.
it's not worth it versus being able to have a positive impact on like, 10,000 young people who are feeling really alone because they're depressed and they think there's something wrong with them and they're at risk. It's like, that's where your energy is much better spent than just having an argument.
Very true. I completely agree with that. Yeah.
But I think that's where meditation, so that's what I would do, just go and meditate by the stream.
Yeah, I remember that. I definitely remember that. Yeah. There's a lot that I learned from that trip, for sure. A lot that I learned from that trip.
Like what?
Oh, well, that was one of the first trips. So obviously anyone listening like wouldn't know, but yeah, like obviously we went on that trip, the 11 of us, all kind of different backgrounds, but a lot of people from like Melbourne. Obviously you're living overseas
I
and
was
stuff,
the
but I
only
guess
girl.
yeah, you were the only girl, and it was an older demographic, and it was really interesting because I genuinely felt like I hadn't met many people in Perth who kind of, with that kind of outlook, I can't even describe it into words. But spending 10 days with all these people who I hadn't met before, I was just like, wow, I've never had these conversations before. Even like there was such a big focus on climate change in that conversation and stuff, and just the kind of knowledge that people had. I was like, wow, these are not the kinds of conversations having in Perth. But so that was one thing that I learned. But I think from that simple thing we're talking about of communication, I learned a lot from observing others, because there were lots of times where we were in conversations and actually watching others communicate, because there was nothing else to do. We didn't have our phones. All we had to do was listen and watch other people communicate. And I learned a lot about, well, what's a good way to communicate and what's a bad way to communicate. And I made plenty of mistakes. I'm saying this from the point of view that I don't think I'm the best communicator by any means. But then sometimes it's nice to, when you're not involved in it yourself, to just sit there and watch. I mean, my own dad was involved in some of this, in shouting contests and stuff. And I was like, wow, I just found it so eye-opening. But another thing that hit me, which hopefully if anyone from the trip has listened to this, that I'm offended, but it's like, I was watching people who are so successful, who have achieved so much, fighting like a bunch of 6-year-olds, and it was the juxtaposition there was crazy. That like I know kids in year 6 who could have a healthier conversation with better communication. And then I realized, life success, monetary success, this whatever, what you've done in career, how many employees you've got is one thing. Communication is its own skill. Communicational success, if that's even a term that I've just created, that's something else. It's very eye-opening for me. And I realized, wow, like the emphasis that needs to be put on communication. So yeah, also it's definitely entertaining at times, for sure. Because when you're out there, you've got no phones and nothing. You've got no keeping up with the Kardashians. That was our keeping up with the Kardashians, watching each of us get involved with it. So it was amazing, that trip. It was amazing.
Yeah. But the important thing is you're learning, right? That's the difference. And that's why it's like you saying that at the start, like, oh, me coming on this podcast, like I haven't achieved whatever. But it's not, it's like, who cares what you achieve? That's not really the point. The point is about like continuing to learn, having a positive impact on the people around you. Like people talk about legacy, whatever, right? But it's like when you die, the biggest impact you will have had in your life, unless you are like Hitler or someone who negatively impacts millions of lives, or someone who positive. Okay, anyway, apart from those extreme examples, the biggest impact you'll have is on the people around you, like the people you see every day, your family, your friends, the people you work with. And if you're just a dick or not a nice person to be around, like, who really cares how much money you have or what accolades you have? That's
Yeah,
not the thing that stays when you're gone, is like how you're viewed in other people's memories. Um, and so I
agreed.
think
I
what you
really agree
said,
with
which
that.
is being kind to everyone, is really important.
Mm, yeah.
And constantly wanting to be, that's what you keep hearing from you, that you're so self-aware and like you're looking at ways you've acted in the past that you weren't in line with how you want to be, and you want to learn from that, and that's
Mm,
awesome, and you're only 20.
mm. Yeah. Well, you sound only 20. I actually feel like I'm actually getting quite a bit older now. Sometimes I'll think to myself, like, I'll say something, I'll be like, hey, because I'm pretty short. Yeah, I'm a short guy. Like, I'm always like looked at as a small kid in my community. I'll like do something or say something. I'll be like, hey, that's pretty mature of me. And I'll be like, actually, wait, I'm 20 years old. This is probably expected from a 20-year-old. So I probably actually don't. I guess it depends who you hang out with, but I spend most of my time with like high school kids who are 13, 14, right? So I feel
Mm,
like I actually sometimes feel like I'm getting a bit old. Like as each session goes on, I'm like, I feel like, is there gonna come a time where I'm no longer relatable to these kids and stuff? Um, but
no.
I guess yeah, it's all perspective at the end of the day. That's another. We could sit here all day and talk about the keys to life. I think perspective is always a different thing. It's all relative. So relativity, right? That's
Mm.
another can of worms. Yeah.
Okay, can I ask you my last three questions?
Please do. Please do.
This is
Thank you.
amazing that we've survived so long. So you were having internet issues and at home, and so you drove to uni to do this from a car, which this
Yeah,
is
I'm
just
in my car.
amazing, the dedication for you to do this
Thank you.
podcast. So thank you.
Thank you. And I'm currently genuinely, my back's quite wet right now because I'm really heating up in here because it's quite hot right now. I've got the windows a bit down, but I'm actually loving it. I'm loving this podcast. So thank
Okay, so do you have a mindfulness practice, or what helps you stay present or stay calm, I guess?
you. To be honest with you, I think I'd be lying if I was like, yeah, I do meditation and yeah, I'm quite spiritual. I think sometimes people ask me, like, are you spiritual? The main kind of, it's strange. The main kind of mindfulness, what I do when I'm feeling stressed, what I do to ground myself is, I think it all revolves around Michael again. You know, um, I think for me, mindfulness comes from kind of reflecting on myself. I think when I get most stressed, it's because I'm like, oh, I'm not doing well enough, or I'm not being the person I want to be, or this is getting stressful. And I find that sometimes just sitting there, I've got a photo in my room of Michael and myself and a couple of my mates from year 12. And there's also a message that Michael wrote me um, about a month before he passed away, which I have hanging on my bedroom wall. And I kind of look at those two things, and I think again, it kind of just keeps me grounded again. Because whenever that stress of I'm not doing well enough, I'm not being good enough, I kind of look at those two things. And I'll sit there and be like, think, what would Michael say to me now? It's kind of like I kind of use him, even though it's my own views being reflected. I kind of use it to give me that perspective that think about all that's happened in the past. Think about, oh, well, this stress. What is this compared to what I went through last year? Um, I kind of use to think, well, look at all I've achieved since then. Like, I am on the right path. Or when I think about, is this the right thing that I'm doing? Having this kind of mindset, I kind of look at that photo and I think, well, would Michael be disappointed in what I'm doing? Just simple things of uh, caring so much what others think about me. It happens to me so much, especially with this TikTok thing of caring so much about likes. Kind of looking at that message in that photo and remembering what Michael would say to me. It's kind of a big deviation from what you've asked me. I don't have a mindfulness thing, but I would say, what's the whole point of mindfulness to me? It's the kind of, I guess, ground you and stuff when things are starting to go astray. Is my perception of it, and I think having these two things there is what grounds me when I have things that easily go astray. So that's probably my answer. Michael, the
Yeah.
concept of Michael and his passing. Yeah.
Okay. Is there a book that's had a big impact on you?
Yeah. Hear me out here. I kind of set myself this big aim to read a lot. Like I was telling myself that because I wasn't a big reader. I'm genuinely not a reader. I do not read. I think maybe it's a bit of an issue with our generation and the future generations. But I told myself like you have your emails that you send out, right? And I told myself when I came up with uni, I was like, I'm gonna read the emails. I'm gonna do so much. But I guess with uni, I just got so involved in that I didn't get around to it. Sanjeev Uncle, one of the people on the trip, he gave me this amazing book to read, which I still haven't gotten around to reading. Even now. You told me to read this book, The Game, right? The Game. I still haven't got around to reading it.
That is not something you should be repeating out of context. That's like, I actually want to read that book to understand. Oh my God, that's a whole nother conversation. I think that book's kind of messed up.
But again, isn't that such a good thing to read a book that's messed up?
Yeah. It's like if you want to understand this psychology stuff about how to pick up women, but there's like this book and it could be interesting. Oh my God, this sounds like I'm like some like okay, now I really need to read that book.
No, I that's what I really value that conversation with you when you told me about that, because I've never had a conversation, to be honest, with a female who was just kind of so open to that kind of outlook. What I mean is that conversation with you as well is like, you asked me what's a book that's changed me. It's more conversations that have stuck with me. In a way, Sanjeev Uncle gave me that book, but his conversation kind of summed up that book. You were talking about it was the 6 degrees around climate change, which I still haven't read. But yeah, I guess, you get many meanings from books. I think there are quotes that have stuck with me. There are conversations. I might change your question so I don't sound like illiterate and say, I'll maybe say a couple of quotes, which, to be honest, I got from TikTok, but I feel like they're actually, that's our new way of learning these days. But two quotes which were, learn to love what you have before life teaches you to love what you lost. I really like that one. And there's another one, which is, I saw recently, which is comparison is the thief of joy. Which I thought, wow, I was like, that's quite profound. Comparison is the thief of joy. Because, yeah, to be honest, the main books I've actually read in completion are probably Diary of a Wimpy Kid when I was in year 6 and the Harry Potter books.
That's so fun. I read lots when I was little, like really little, like, anyway, and then I didn't read again until like 3 years ago, and then I just became obsessed with nonfiction books. So if you ask me when I was 20 as well, all I would be able to say is Harry Potter. So it's more getting a sense of what's influenced you, and that makes sense.
Yeah.
Okay.
Thank you.
Last question is, I'm just thinking about The Game. I think I'm gonna have to now read it and write about it in my newsletter and explain. To be honest, I'm gonna be honest with you, Delia.
Obviously, what we spoke about in that conversation was a private conversation, but I tried to take a leaf out of your book, and I think out of your book, not the book's book, but like I think that conversation changed my mindset a bit, and I hope it could help me soon, if you know what I mean. So,
okay.
So yeah,
I was basically just, honestly, this is the stuff I might start making TikToks on. That's like reframing how you see failure. Like if you're too scared to talk to a girl, it's because you're worried about the outcome. But if you just see it as a success, if you just see that you approaching someone obviously in a polite and not violent Andrew Tate way, but you approaching girl is a success, is a win. This is what I got out of this James Smith, this personal trainer, talks about this. He says, yeah, it's the same with a job interview. If you say, like, I'm going to go in there, give it my best shot, that's a win. Like, it doesn't matter about the outcome. It's not the success or failure isn't based on the outcome. So it's the same with a girl. It's like successful night because I went and spoke to someone. And even if they totally ignore you, reject you, give you a fake number, you're like, that was a win.
Yeah. Yeah. That kind of ties
as
back
long
to
as
that.
you're not violent.
Yeah. Obviously in a respectful way. Give it. Yeah. Let's make that clear. Let's make that clear.
So that's what our conversation was, right?
Yeah. What's how keen to know the final question though?
The final question is what 3 words describe the best version of you?
Will it not come like? Does it not? I always get scared. Does it not come across like then like arrogant or whatever? It's like, am I literally trying to compliment myself, or am I misinterpreting the question?
Or like the person you want to show up as. So mine, yeah. So it's like you could say honest. That's not being arrogant. It just means you really value honesty.
So the top 3 values that I want to kind of define. I think justice has to be one. Then there's different words for it: compassion, kindness, respect, courtesy. I think justice. So someone being like, this guy, he was really just. He was really
fair.
Yeah, he was really fair. He was really kind. And he was really fair. He was really kind. I really want this third one. You know what? The word love, is that a value though?
Yeah, you could say loving.
Loving, kind, and fair.
Just.
Genuinely. And I might just add on to this thing. I know it was a very simple question, but people have asked this before, and it's like, well, people have asked me who's my favorite movie character, and it's actually this character called Aman from this Bollywood movie called Kal Ho Na Ho. Now, some people may have heard of Shah Rukh Khan. He's one of the most famous Indian actors alive, and it's a movie called Kal Ho Na Ho, which means like tomorrow may never come kind of thing. And he plays this character called Aman who he's got heart disease, but he doesn't tell anyone. But he kind of is like a menace to everyone. But he just spreads love. Like he just spreads and he fixes this broken family just by kind of entering their life. And there's very much this thing that connotation to him being like an angel or Jesus. And that character is someone that I really love. So if there's a character that I want to be like that I want to embody, it's him in that way that he spreads love. He makes people happy. So yeah, I think being fair, kind, but I think that really underlined that word of loving. Someone who spreads love is what the type of person I'd want to be. Yeah.
Amazing.
Yeah.
By the way, I watched the Bollywood film you told me to watch on the plane back from India. The one, I can't remember what it's called, with the 2 brothers who were both dating the same girl.
Wait,
and the grandpa.
Are you sure they weren't friends? Wait, the 2 brothers.
No, they're brothers. Like one lives in London, one lives in New York, and then they come home.
Oh, Kapoor and Sons.
Yeah.
The family drama.
Yeah.
Wow.
I loved it.
Did you enjoy it?
Yeah, I loved it.
That's awesome. That's a great film. That is a great film. There's so many people who might listening to this, they might not know anything about this at all. But yeah, that's a great film. Kapoor and Sons. Lots of life lessons.
Okay.
There.
Is there anything else you want to say before we wrap up?
Probably got a final question for you. I'd probably just like to say, genuinely thank you so much. On a personal note, it's so special to have this conversation with you after months from our special trip that we had in India. I genuinely loved it. I think what you're doing in this podcast is just amazing. But I think my question to you is, yeah, where do you, I don't want to actually ask you where do you see yourself in 5 years. It's very general. I'm going to ask you, like, where do you see yourself with this podcast in particular? This is growing up, right? You had your cancelled, right? Capital C, capital A, capital M. But what's the aim for you with this? Because we did have conversations around. I had this dream for kind of what your brand of Delia would look like moving forward. But yeah, give me something there.
I guess it's really an experiment, so I'm just going to keep going, and I kind of follow my intuition of what feels right and who feels right to talk to, and then I don't know. It's a good question, but I'm giving it loads of time, not putting any pressure on, because I think if you put pressure on and you make it too structured or too much like work, it kind of just kills it. But the thing is, it's like publishing 2 a week, and that's what I'm sticking to. And it's like, I'm just learning so much about it, like having the courage. I was so scared to ask people. I was so scared of rejection. So it's like having the courage to ask people. And now that I'm getting more comfortable, it's like being able to approach people who I love their work and I think they're doing. I mean, sadly, the author of that book's passed away, Nonviolent Communication, but it's stuff like that, like talking to people who have written things or who are doing work that I think is really positive or meaningful, and getting them to come on. And even stuff like someone who understands the stuff you're talking about, like porn or like these dangerous messages to young people, like getting an academic on, like out of this conversation, now I'm interested in that. And then it's like, okay, can I find an academic who can come on and teach us about that? But then the more I talk to people, it's like, okay, how do we have, like, this conversation is super important. How do we get more people to listen? And it's like, okay, that's where it's experimenting with TikTok and everything like that. But I need to make sure I don't attach myself to it too much, right? Because it's just like, okay, this is the broader. And I think that's your thing with medicine. It's like, okay, yeah, medicine, that might be your path. But maybe it's not. And if the mission is to help people, especially young people, because you feel so passionately about this, there's so many ways to achieve that, right? And so it's the same with me. It's like, okay, if I want to have a positive influence on the world to counteract a lot of the negative stuff in the world, how can I do that? Like, this is one way. But there might be a different way that I don't even know about. But it is just like every day. I don't know. It's just so much learning, right? That's not a very good answer to your question.
Nah, that's awesome.
But if you have any, so that's why if you have any ideas, or if anyone listening has any ideas of like, the next thing I'll do for this is like go video on it, and like then have it on YouTube as well, and then get better at like the intro and whatever.
Yeah.
I don't know, like constantly just improving it.
It's awesome. And that's what I mean about your mindset. I think there's so much everyone can take away from that, and myself. I think the mindset of the way you've structured it moving forward, kind of with that lack of structure and more just seeing how it goes and not putting that pressure on yourself. I think from a holistic point of view, I think it's just going to give you a lot more clarity and a lot more joy throughout this whole thing. It's going to make you want to keep doing it. And I genuinely mean that. Like, it won't become a job for you then, you know? So I think that's huge. I would, I think it's amazing. I'd love to see like break into the TikTok world and stuff, like, and go big there. Because I think, and I think, like I said, when I said that they're on that trip, there's so many people I hadn't met before. You were probably at the top of the list there. I genuinely just hadn't met anyone like you before, and I think you're very unique in the best way possible. So there's so much to share there, and you got the courage to share stuff and talk about stuff which a lot of people don't. So I think it's amazing.
Yeah. Well, I'm laughing because get ready for my first videos to be super cringe. But that's why yours is like really inspirational to me. Not because it is like you can see the massive difference from the first ones you did to the ones you're doing now. But it's like, obviously you have to learn. That's how you learn. And it's like awesome that you have the courage to like put them out there where you're just learning. Which I guess is this podcast, like it's like I'm learning how to speak more fluently. That's the other stuff. Like every episode I do, I'm learning like how to communicate more effectively. Like it's all just practice, right?
Yeah. Yeah, you must find it hard. Do you not, when I'm talking, I spend like 8 minutes talking straight. Do you not find it hard to like stay focused and be like, bro, what is this guy saying?
No, I'm listening. It's interesting what you're saying.
Okay, that's good. That's good.
And because I listen to them all back as well. I learned so much when I listen to them back.
Yeah.
Okay, but I've got to... This is how these conversations always end. Me being like, I had a coffee right before this, so now I have to run.
That's totally true. Yeah. No, thank you so much. Thank you so much.
That sounds so gross. I mean, I need to pee anyway.
Yeah. No. I also, like, I'll be honest. Like it's like 9:40 p.m. I'm in my uni car park, and it's still so hot and humid. I also got to prepare for this Man Up trip coming up now. So, but thank you so much. We did it. We almost hit 2 hours there. So thank you so much for the opportunity, and it's so great to be able to, because obviously I've seen each other on camera now, to be able to see you again and know that you're on an awesome path forward. I think we're both on a decent path going forward. So yeah,
and we can chat again soon.
Awesome. Thank you so much. You run off now. Thanks, Delia.
Bye.
Bye.